This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode contains spoilers from The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, as well as slight spoilers from the ACOFAE series. There's also mentions of The Boys and Game of Thrones. For full list, please see show notes. There are also discussions surrounding sexual assault, suicide, and the patriarchy.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the fantasy, literature, and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are discussing the 1985 classic, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood.
And I think we read this book. So we're going to be discussing the book itself. We've both watched at least like the first season, but for the context of this episode, we're going to be discussing the book. We're going to be referencing season 1 at least of Hulu, but we didn't do a rewatch or anything. And kind of like the media crossover and conversations that come with books and adaptations and perceptions and just kind of the conversation surrounding that.
Yes. And I think a really good way to start that conversation is just to ask you, Jessica Marie. So did you have any idea that the end of this book was going to be like that?
No, this is the first time that I read the book. I never read it beforehand. I had watched the first season of the show with no book context. So I remember telling you in a voice memo, I said, "Oh, I'm so frustrated about blah, 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 blah." And you go, "Oh, I know exactly where you are in the book because you're not at the end yet." And you're like, "Just wait." But and what was your experience with this? Because you had read it before the show. Like, how was that context for you?
Okay, so I'm just going to jump into this conversation too. We have established that Jess saw the show first and then read the book. I read the book after it was announced that the show is coming out. I had just moved to Germany. I was just like, whatever, that'll be fun. I need English things to fulfill my time. Whatever, I'll read this book and then I'll have something to watch soon coming out. That was my thought process. Okay. I think the conversation to be had is that, so I read the book first, then watched the show, and the show wiped out everything from the book for me, except for the ending. Of course, that ending just knocked me on my ass. It took me by complete surprise. I had absolutely no idea that was even part of it. It was amazing. I loved it. Okay. The show it is graphic, but not in a gory way. It's just so visceral. Watching something is a very different experience from reading something. Your imagination can kind of censor things for yourself. But when you're actually watching it, you're just like, hot damn, that is fucked up. So I think it's a conversation to be had because the characters are different. The source material says one thing and the show just went in a completely different direction. Or a direction, I guess. I guess we will never really know. There's just so much of the show. Season 6 is in 2024. Season 6 is just starting to film. And I think that is another conversation to be had as well. I stopped watching this show because it got very depressing. It got very depressing, and everything else around me got a little bit too real. And TV as escapism was something that I was searching for. And The Handmaid's Tale was not escapism. It was too close to ideas that were happening in real life. Of course, this is the point. Of course, this is the intention of the author, all of this, but hot fucking damn. It's not something that I want to escape to. The same conversation can kind of be had about The Walking Dead. A lot of people stopped watching The Walking Dead for the same thing. It was just torture porn in a sense. It was just sad all the time, and there was nothing to like bring you joy. And I remember specifically watching The Handmaid's Tale when they were in DC and their mouths are sewn shut. And you're just like, you know what? I think I can just ponder this and I don't need to go forward. And it was then incredible, Jess, to go back and read now with you the actual source material, because and this is my point to all of this, cannot separate the show and the book. You know, people say art from the artist. I can't separate the show from the book. I know that Serena Joy is older with a limp and severe arthritis. Like, I know these things. I know this. I know she drags her. I know this. But Serena Joy is the Serena Joy from the show. I know the commander has silver hair. That's Joseph Fiennes. I know these things. Offred has brown hair. That's not Elizabeth Moss. It was very eye-opening to see how the media, the visual, I guess, this media has taken
screen adaptation.
The screen adaptation has taken over. Has really taken over, and like what is that, superimposed itself on my memory of reading the book, so much so that reading the book was almost a completely new experience. But then also it's a strange conversation to have, because you read the book and you know exactly where the show ends. Like where the book ends and where that ends in the show. You're like, oh, okay. Okay. And so to have it go beyond that is really something. Of course, the same thing happened for Game of Thrones. So it was just.
And you have that Game of Thrones background for context too. Because you also, once again, read it before the series show.
I did. And of course, that's a whole other conversation with Germ coming out and talking shit about House of the Dragon. Just write your damn book, Germ. Don't die first. So I think too, circling back and kind of bringing this into just a different point. I am chronically online. That is just something that I am. And I was on Threads the other day and I saw this thread, and it was this person talking about how they were under the impression that Feyre from ACOTAR is a shitty painter. They're like, I know this. I've seen like 1,000 like social media posts about this. She's a shitty painter. And then this person went and read the books and was like, wait a minute. Nobody says that. Nobody acts like that. Rhys has them proudly in his house. Nesta's pissed off that she doesn't have one. Like, where did this?
People are crying at her recreation of like the Ramiel and like the day that the boys won the challenge. I can't remember what it's called right off the top of my head. But like these are moments that she recreates. Very visual. Yeah.
And people are not shitting on them. So she was like, where did this come from? It came from social media. So this incorrect, incorrect from the source material. It's not there in the pages. It's not there in the black and white. We have created this for these characters and superimposed them on top of the character that the author has already done. So now this person going into it was completely shocked that this characteristic that we have given them in social media did not exist on the pages, and was like, well, now everything is because it's not this funny thing. It's really actually fucking serious. And it paints the book in a whole different light. So I think that is a bigger conversation to be had, that, what happens when that does happen. And again, how pissed off can we be about that? And again, what responsibility is there, if any, exists about this kind of thing? Because, I would say, no responsibility, because, we can do whatever, right? It's just, jokes and stuff. But I don't know. I don't know. This is this bigger conversation that I had when we were reading this, Jess. Talk to me. Talk to me. I've been talking a lot.
I have no idea where to start because of course, yes to everything you're saying. I agree with you. I think we were even loosely talking about it's not just the painting. This has been a conversation with a lot of, because I don't want to say Handmaid's Tale is a fandom, but like other fan series. I mean, we talk about it with Cassian. We have dubbed him as the himbo. At no point has he ever been a himbo. He is one of the smartest. He is strategic. He leads, armies. That doesn't go casually. And I think we even talked about it with like before ACOFAE even came out of people rewriting the narrative in their fan fiction. Do we have a right to be upset about the material that comes out if we are creating certain stories and certain narratives and everything? And I find it with Handmaid's Tale, it's so interesting. I think it stems more along the lines of the Game of Thrones concept of we now have 5-6 seasons of Handmaid's Tale, when really season 1 is what was pulled from this. And this book has always been in production. There was never a time that it wasn't. And like some of the research I did beforehand. And Margaret Atwood said at one point, and we'll put links in our show notes too, of this material, when she pulled it from, because everyone's like, oh, how did you do your research? How did you pull from this? She goes, the internet didn't exist. I didn't make up anything. These are and then she showed like clippings of things that she found in the news that was all based on very real material. And at the time she was writing this, she was like, she goes, I was born in 1939. I have gone through different decades of different revolutions, of different waves of feminism, of different political conversations. And she goes, I've seen how women get into the workforce. I've seen how they, how you position it to not be in the workforce so much and how that's kind of puppeteered through the media. And she had that thought once again in the 80s when she was writing this book of, well, how do you take women's choice away? Because that is a lot. And you hear that a lot with what Offred says in this book is about choice and power and what is being taken away. Because that's what happens when you don't have access to money. Because financial freedom is the first step that you hear in any women's life. I mean, me personally, it was one of the first things that both my aunts have said to me when they came over when I was growing up. They were like, make sure that you never have to be financially reliable on anybody else. And there is a freedom that comes with that. And so how do you take that freedom away? You make someone become dependent on someone else. And that's how this book starts. That's how, like in the flashbacks, that's how it happens in the series also. And then the character development of who we see between Offred, who's also known as June, and her husband, Luke, before Gilead becomes Gilead, we're having two different versions of the relationship between the book and the show itself.
And I want to stop you right there because at no point in the book does her name ever mentioned as June.
Then why? But then I guess this goes to like what I'm consuming with the media of what we've put into, because we know like Janine is off whoever. Mm-hmm. We have this other person who's off Glenn. Mm-hmm. And then I think she even says in the book at one point, our narrator says, too many names, we become too familiar, and that's, then we become talking, then we have relationships, because that you want to isolate these people.
Well, and there's a list of names that she kind of talks about that she was with in the Red Center, the Rachel and Leah Center. And she says, and they are the characters that we see in the show. It's like Janine and Moira and like all these people. And she says June, it's the last name. And she does not say that that is her name. So Margaret Atwood has said, like, yeah, like everybody said that her name is June. And like, that wasn't my intention. That is the author saying this. That wasn't my intention, but it fits. So why not? It's one of those things. It's one of those things. And also too, this creation in the book of Serena Joy, we have in the ending being like, well, Serena Joy, like, wasn't her name. It was like this malicious invention of the narrator. And that is also something I want to touch on before we dive into this a little bit more. Our narrator, Offred, is incredibly unreliable. She herself goes back and revises at least 2 encounters I can think of off the top of my head a couple times in the text, being like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Another time being like, I added that in. I took that away. And it's just like, oh, okay. So what actually happened? Okay. The distinction that I want to make is the distinction that Margaret Atwood makes about this type of book and this genre of fiction. So Margaret Atwood is absolutely adamant that this is not science fiction. And she wants to be like so clear. Like she believes that like science fiction are things that happen that are not possible today. Not at all. So she views her work as speculative fiction, and that definition for this purpose would be speculative fiction is an umbrella genre of fiction that encompasses all the subgenres that depart from realism or strictly imitating everyday reality, instead presenting fantastical, supernatural, futuristic, or other imaginative realms. So we have her speculative fiction, by contrast, contains all too familiar reflections of humanity, detailing dark machinations that are happening now or could easily happen tomorrow. So science fiction being like, well, that's fucking impossible. And speculative fiction being like, what happened? What would happen if we had this idea and fleshed it out? Because that's what happens. Like, what happens? Like, we need to take over the United States and consolidate power. What is the easiest way to do that? Well, blow up the government, subjugate the women, put the men in, stages of power, and, make a hierarchy. Done. Easy. And that's what happened. So I like this distinction too. What is it? Science fiction is Carl Urban in space, and fantasy is Carl Urban on a horse. I mean, that works so far. So, I think, going in there, Carl Urban.
Now we just need Carl Urban and speculative fiction and politics, which is kind of what, like, The Boys is about.
In The Boys. Yeah, it could be speculative fiction. So there we go. Carl Urban in The Boys is speculative fiction. There we go. There's our spectrum of where we fit. But I do just think that's an interesting conversation. Like, as Margaret Atwood has said, nothing that she depicts in this book is something that she made up. It's all, just as you said, it all happened. She's got, all of her notes and her evidence to back it all up. And all she did is flesh everything out to its logical conclusion, which is, of course, completely horrifying. Now, we know that if you've seen the show, obviously, if you've seen the show, then you know what happens in the first season. If you've read the book, then you also know what happens in the first season. But Jess, we were talking about this and you were like, oh, we were talking about plot points. Like, oh, that's that scene. That's that scene. But that scene took place there. But in the book, it actually took place here and they were doing this and it's really different. And honestly, it's powerful. Here's the thing. It's powerful either way.
Yeah.
Right. It gets the point across either way. It's just the way that we have it in the book is just like really, it's really something. So
I have a question. I know that we both read this book this time through audio. Yes. Did you read it the first time through audio as well? Because I'm wondering, okay, because I was going to say, like, I wonder if reading it, and I know we had this experiment with the Serpent and Dove trilogy of, like, would the impact be different through reading a book? Or, maybe, when they were chanting and one of, they're just kind of like putting the shame on women in one of the many scenes of, SA was happening when everybody was like, oh, let's do some confession, our weekly confession amongst each other. And then they were kind of chanting against the one person. It was your fault. You asked for it. It was terrible. But then I'm wondering if this is how we're hearing it through our audio read, is it supposed to come across a different way through text, just like the June, or does like how we perceived it through audio, does that change? Is the message changed if we didn't read it physically? I guess again, it's all speculative, not speculative fiction, but like.
Here's the thing. Claire Danes, the narrator, is a fantastic actress. So I trust that she has enough direction to do what was intended here. And her emphasis on the syllables are correct. and everything is as, everybody would want it to be. Cause like she's Claire fucking Danes, right? And she reads the fuck out of this. So I trust that she did this right, because her pauses on things like that last name, she's listing all of the names. June is that last one. She pauses. She goes, ... June, ... So it is implied, it's like all of these things are implied. So, all right. But Jess, what is this book though? I mean, we were talking a lot. What is this book about?
I feel like, I can't even say like I feel. This book is about a new political system in a way of who's going to lead. There is a decline in births. So you have women who are going to procreate for the people in power and taking in a very oppressive regime where the government is controlling how monetary is exchanged, because paper money doesn't exist. It is a thing of the past. Their parents are scrapbooking it. News is controlled. Food is controlled. Conversation is controlled. Scare tactics are used amongst any sort of relationship that is to be had. No friendships unless you are wives in a position of power, whose husbands are in a position of power. I don't know. It feels really scary. And there's isolation involved. The plot, it feels kind of like, what is the plot? We know what is going on, but with Offred being an unreliable narrator, she's just kind of recounting her experiences in this new government that she's being exposed to. So in my research, I'm led to believe that this is set in 2005. So when this was written in 84, 85, all of that, it was future speculative fiction. So set in 2005, set at Harvard. Let's be so clear. It's at Harvard. We're at Harvard, people, and the surrounding areas, Cambridge. And it is, I think, important to note that Offred, because her name is not June in the book. Offred, a pun on being offered, Offred, she is the first generation of women to do this. So it took me a couple of reads to really nail this down. So June and Luke, her husband, are fleeing the takeover of the Sons of Jacob, taking over the government. They are trying to get, I believe, into Canada, and their daughter is 5. And then later, when Serena is like, yo, I can get you a picture. And Offred gets a picture and looks, and she's like, it's been 3 years. She's 8. I know how much time it's been. So I think it's important to talk about that. It took
And Offred struggles with it, just as you said, because she's an unreliable narrator here. It took 3 years for Offred to see the Japanese tourists in short skirts and open toes to be like, oh my God, they're like naked. Oh my God. It took, 3 years to be like, did I really do that? Did I really act like that?
She questioned it from bathing suits. I can't believe I was that.
Wanton.
Lack of a better word, promiscuous. I can't believe I was that just open. She's very, she's kind of being brainwashed at this point because this is all she's ever seen. This is all she knows. This is all, or not all she's ever seen, but all she has been fed for 3 years. And I think this is something that Margaret Atwood said even in one of her interviews, where she goes, you keep forcing and exposing something to someone for so long, repeatedly, and get louder and bigger about the things that you are kind of shoving down people's throats. At some point, you're going to start to believe that.
Yeah, and couple that with punishment. I mean, there's cattle prods here at this re-education center. Like, these women are being hurt. Moira's feet, hands. For our purposes, girls, we don't need your feet or your hands. It's a whole really crazy structure that we have. But Offred and Moira and Janine, all of these people of Glen are the first generation. So they're the
experimental group.
Well, and Aunt Lydia, the aunts, the sector, I guess, the class of women that are tasked with re-education of the handmaids, they keep saying, like, you have the hardest job. It'll get better. Like, the next generation, the wives won't hate you. Like, they will open their arms to you. It'll be like daughters. Like, it won't be like this. And I just find this, because Margaret Atwood had said that this is not, she was not writing like a feminist novel here. She was writing like a deconstruction of power and like who has it, how they get it, how to collect it, and what power actually is. So when we have the ants using the cattle prods, and they are drugging these girls, and they are like forcibly brainwashing them into making them do these things and telling them like, you're the best of the best, like, you're being so pampered, it could be so much worse, over and over and over again.
And the praise too. I mean, one of the examples with Aunt Lydia is with Janine. Like, Janine has had 2 miscarriages at this point, but knows she's very will do anything for adoration and praise. And you're one of my favorites, Janine. Like, you would tell me if anything is going wrong because you're one of my good girls. I mean, that is something that is missing from Janine's life. And you're preying on people who aren't as strong as others. And one thing I will give Offred credit for is she never puts blame and blames anybody for the actions that they seek through. Oh, this person might sell me out, but they might sell me out because they were trying to cover themselves, or, and I feel like because she had the encounter with Moira, and Moira is just very straightforward with her. And then she kind of digests something that Moira told her. And Offred thinks, oh my gosh, Moira was right. I would totally sing like a canary if they questioned me, in a heartache for anything, including Serena saying, I will get a picture of your daughter if you fuck her driver.
Yep. All right. So you mentioned Nick. All right. So correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to do major plot points here. Major plot points. We're introduced because, why am I saying this? Because the book itself is kind of difficult to discuss in a linear way, because the book has I don't know, I'm guessing maybe 10 big things, but the rest of it is Offred's ponderings on things and her musings and moving the egg into the light and staring at it for a really long time and like absorbing the color that she sees in the reflection of the eggshell. Like it's a lot of that.
There's a lot of reflection. Like, oh, they used to do this or they used to do that and walking everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of walking. So, and because she's an unreliable narrator too, while, for example, for the first time when Offred is doing the sex ceremony with Serena and the commander, she has her eyes closed and she's thinking about something completely different. And we have paragraphs and paragraphs of this other thing that she's thinking about that doesn't really have anything to do with anything. And then she snaps back into where she is. It shows us that she's in like a dissociative state, but talking about it in a linear fashion is difficult because like it just didn't have shit to do with shit. Like
she's all over the place. So we're all over the place.
So we're all over the place. Yeah. Okay. So the major plot points, we're introduced to everybody and June is brought to the house. There is the shopping, the ceremony, the asking of, come to my room, the late night kiss with Nick, come to my, the commander wants to see you.
Scrabble.
Yeah.
The relationship she establishes with the commander to the point where it starts having her think, well, maybe I don't want to get out of here. And now what are the other handmaids who are in this Mayday secret operation going to think of me, where I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not that bad.
Mm-hmm. There's the birth, the birth, the salvaging. No, the prayervaganza, the big prayer ceremony, the salvaging, the nightclub, all of the times with Nick, and then the end. And then the end, right?
Yeah. And the end feels very abrupt, even though we know like,
how and why.
Yeah. And it's Mayday and Nick's like, go with that. Like, we know that that's happening, but then it cuts straight to historical epilogue.
Right. So all of those plot points that I just mentioned are in season 1 of the show. Yeah. I mean, they're all there. They're, different, maybe not even season 1, but like different, settings for those things, but they're all there. I distinctly remember the nightclub setting. I distinctly see it. But also the ending, I am just so curious to see if the show is actually going to end the way that the book ends. Here's the thing, Jess, so as you were reading this and as you were going through those set plot points that like you have seen, when you're going through them and you're like, oh, I remember that. Mm-hmm. How was that for you?
It jogged my memory for sure. But there were certain times where I feel like I didn't necessarily remember it again, because this is the book screen, but taking the screen in as it is. Like, I think of Luke. Luke is Offred's pre-Gilead husband. I remember thinking Luke was great. I was like, oh, Luke is nice. Then reading this, I go, oh my gosh, I forgot that they completely had an affair. Oh my gosh, wait, he's awful. Everything that's happening, he keeps being dismissive to her about her concerns. The first it was she was getting fired. Then she couldn't access her money. And then it was like, oh, it's just going to get like transferred to your husband or something. Nothing that was happening had ever impacted him, to the point he continues to be dismissive, to say, you're being paranoid. Well, look what happened. This is why people are paranoid, because we have like a sixth sense for all of these things. And it happened and it didn't impact him. So there was nothing for him. He was still getting laid and she was so not for it. She goes, it's not like, I can't believe this is happening. And she even makes a comment of the word itself, lay, getting laid, and how it's used in context and a patriarchal vocabulary, because it's very actionable and it has nothing to do with the woman, because they were taking women's freedom and oppressing them because men were in control and power in its entirety in every state.
And there's also another little part where the family, Offred and Luke and their daughter are at the grocery store. And she says, like, Luke was across the store at the meat counter because he liked to choose what kind of meat we were going to have for the week because he said that men needed more meat and he wasn't being annoying. Studies had been done.
There was also like a fight with him and her mother. I can't remember what the exact thing was, but I remember
He's very
thinking,
dismissive of her.
Yeah, I was like, come on. And he's like, and then she just says, oh, well, you know, he would just say things to egg her on. No, like he would. I just remember thinking, what is happening? This is not who I thought it was.
Biggest red flag. He kills the cat.
Oh, yeah, I'll handle it. I knew what it was.
And her guilt, like, I should have gone with him. I should have, like, shared that burden with him. Like, it's just awful. He's really awful. And again, he's not like that in the show, at least for as much of the show that I've seen. So, and Offred's musings too. She's like, he is starting to fade. Like, I remember his clothes, like his clothes don't fade, but like his face. And I think also this is a sign of grief too. And I thought it was very interesting to just think about the face makes so many expressions that it's hard to remember like just one, but the clothes don't change. And so the clothes always are like solidified in her mind. So like that's what she remembers most about Luke.
Well, and also if we're thinking of like the comparison between the two, show Luke, she was fighting her way back to him and fighting her way back to their daughter. And book Luke is like, see you when I see you. I'm now,
probably dead.
I'm falling for Nick. He is this relationship. We don't say anything at first, but like the aftercare and like pillow talk is forming a relationship in this oppressed regime into like clinging on to something with the trauma bond. And it was almost like grieving a person who is alive, but she doesn't know if he's alive. She doesn't know if she's dead. She was just like in her heart, she was kind of still married, but understands circumstances, doesn't feel like this was an affair. I don't think the reader does either, but in the show, it was still like, I hope you understand. I know you're in Canada, but please understand the circumstances while still trying to fight to get to him. That was show Luke. We ain't fighting for book Luke.
No, we ain't fighting for book Luke. Okay. I want to talk about the religious aspect of this. Just, I have a religion. Background. This is my shit. This is my shit.
Professional. I can't wait.
I love this. Okay. So Margaret Atwood has said that the sons of Jacob are not Christians. Like, these people are not Christians. They are going out and they're persecuting the Catholics, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Quakers. This regime in particular has relocated all of the Black people in America to, I think, North Dakota to farm. And they call them the children of Heb. And then all of the Jewish people, they had the option to convert or be sent back to Israel. And it is revealed to us in the end that a lot of the people that chose to go back to Israel were just dumped overboard in the boats. It's an awful regime. Okay. So these people clearly are not Christian because they have no regard for human life. All right. So what has happened? These people are using Genesis of the Bible to justify what they're doing. And it's interesting, like, no, they're not like Catholics, because like there's a polygamy part of this that a lot of people in the Christian sphere would just like not be cool with, right? These are Margaret Atwood's words, by the way, not mine. This is what she is saying. So these people are using the specific passages in Genesis to justify how they are going to subjugate and control women. And they're going to do that by using the like Rachel, the Leah, the handmaiden, the Bill, all of that stuff, which if you actually look at it is a weird competition between these women to have babies. That's really all it is. And when they can't anymore, they enlist help of like their employee to like have more babies on behalf of them. It's just.
And let's not forget, this is the conversation is that everything is the women's fault. There is not, it has nothing to do with the men being sterile, even though the doctors we later are like, look, the guys are sterile. We can't say that. Not necessarily all men, but the men that your commanders that you're with, they're sterile. So let's explore other avenues. But we can't say that to masculinity. It's too fragile to do that. And to be punished if they are not pregnant by the sterile men.
Yes. They have, I think it's 6 years, right? They have 2 years at each posting, and they have like 3 chances, like 3 posts. I'm not sure exactly how it works.
It goes back. And then I think one of the things they said was like, and after 6 months, they have like 6 months to nurse. And then that's like on to the next.
So obviously these people, as Margaret Atwood has said, are not Christian, because we have like group killings. Let's be so clear about what happens here. The salvagings are just ways for, what is it? They call it like a steam valve for the female population to kind of just like get out all of this anger and frustration. And essentially the government uses it to kill its political enemies, which like, okay, kind of genius if you think about it, because Offred doesn't put that together. And it speaks to, again, these people are using a specific section of a specific religion to justify their actions. But this is all kind of like cobbled together from like, what?
I know. I was just going to say, like, I feel like there are a lot of religions that do that now, where they cherry pick what parts of the Bible that man wrote and rewrote to apply to the religion that they want to put forward.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's this whole thing too about like purity, and that's why the handmaidens wear red, like it's for blood. It's like all of this stuff, right? So you have all of this cherry picked religious, like I cannot say the word.
Iconography.
Iconography. But they don't go to church. They have silent meditation. They have silent prayer. They talk about the Lord. We're not talking about Jesus here. Like, he's not up here. Like, it's very specific about what they're doing and how they're wording things under his eye. Like, may the Lord open. It's very specific wording here. And it is all kind of acting to have this kind of like 1984, like someone is watching, this oppressive kind of like stillness around. Like, I need to be very quiet. I don't know who's listening. Everyone is out to get me, kind of like paranoia that we have going on. We're walking in 2x2s. We're going through like security. We're going through checkpoints. All of this to say that when we get to Jezebel's, right? What does the commander say? Oh, well, men need to be men, but only like certain men, right?
And the women know this. Like, they've accepted that this is just part of nature and part of who we are. They kind of turned a blind eye, but like, we need a place to let loose because this is who we are.
Specifically, and this is what the commander says, and it's always stuck out to me. He says, like, when you said that, he goes, women know this. That's why they have so many clothes. That's why they change their outfits all the time, because they know that men need different women. So women try to change themselves to trick the man into thinking that they are different. And I was just like, oh my God, you delusional fuck.
Yes. Yeah, I was just like, are you kidding me? He really thinks we're that dumb.
And he's sitting there like, right? And she's just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, are you serious? But that whole, all of that, because it's not, here's the thing. It's not just the district, or it's not just like the people at Harvard. It's not just like Cambridge. That club has dignitaries from other nations. It has like visiting people. And he's like, well, this is how it's done. This is how trade gets done. This is how you meet people. This is how you network. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You have to network and trade and like do business in a back alley because the theocracy that you created,
that you created
is not conducive to business. How the fuck does that make sense? It only makes sense if you are fearful of women. That's the only way it makes sense, because you have to do all of that to control women.
It's the instilling fear onto women. And it goes back to what we were saying with, you need to isolate. You need the women to feel isolated. You need to have the women feel like there's no sense of camaraderie. You need to make examples of the women so they would turn on each other, so they can survive. You need to create a state where there is no camaraderie, because I think it has been proven time and time again, historically, like not in dystopian fiction, like not in like it's not fiction. It is in the news what happens when women come together and actually invoke change. And men know this.
Yeah. And I do find it very interesting that the times where Offred, our unreliable narrator, but a narrator nonetheless, feels this sense of camaraderie and this sense of like group justice, this sense of like swept up in something bigger, is during these kind of horrifying things. This group birth that she has to experience with all of the other handmaidens. They're all together, like they're all like sweating and they're pushing and they're breathing together, and there's all of these women in the same room, and like Offred says, like her breasts start to be heavy, she feels it in her stomach. It's this general like crowd, this rush, this release. We could do anything.
And then she has this sympathetic leaking of her milk ducts. And also every single handmaiden that we know, and I think it's kind of like it's reconfirmed at the end in the epilogue, but not leading up to it, which was interesting, that every single handmaiden had to have given birth at least once. We knew this with Janine and certain individuals, but it was confirmed, like that was part of the stipulation to be a handmaiden. So in that, womanhood moment in the birthing scene, they were all having these birthing flashbacks of what it means to give birth, natural birth in this sense.
And that is the camaraderie. That is the oneness, the swept up, the feeling that you have. You have that again during the salvaging when they are just like attacking those men, that man, and hanging those women. Like it's this big part, like you're part of something like bigger, and that thing is terrible, but it's like all you have, right?
Well, yeah. And isn't the salvaging, and please correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm just remembering it incorrectly, was that they were saying that moving forward, they weren't going to say why people were going to be killed. And it was also like, it sat so heavy with her. She was like, wait, part of that helped us know kind of where we were wavering, and that sense of camaraderie of, what are we doing? What aren't we doing? Where are we walking the line? And now we don't have that, because it was like the regimen realized what they were sharing, because also women aren't supposed to read. Women aren't supposed to write. So we're not supposed to have access to the news.
Right. Right. And also that kind of goes to, again, this camaraderie of women, this underground railroad of women, this network of information. Like it is said, the Marthas have their own network of news. They know what's going on. The handmaidens have some sort of network, and they all do the buttering. Like they all do like certain things. Like they all kind of, stick together in small ways to kind of like show, again, their unity with each other. But again, everyone is out for themselves, but within the group, they are for the group, which I find that kind of control and power dynamics to be very interesting.
Yeah, because even if like another specific example I think of is Offglen 1.0 killed herself.
Yes.
But Offred didn't know this. So then Offglen 2.0 comes around and Offred's like, my friend's looking a little dowdy today and she's kind of shorter and oh my gosh, it's a different and Offglen. And they're trying to feel each other out, see who knows what of the Mayday. And Offglen straight up says, she goes, I know what you're about, that I'm not in on that. But later, you know, she does say, but your friend killed herself, lay low. And that was probably the best way for her to go out before getting caught, you know? And it was, but I want no part of whatever you want a part of. Do not bring me with you.
And also too, there is, just as you mentioned earlier, a significant portion of this book where during Offred and Nick's like affair, more or less, where Offred gives up. And she gives up trying to tap into the Mayday network. She gives up trying to collect news. She gives up on of Glenn, essentially. And she says like, oh, she's done with me. Like, whatever. I just don't. I am living for these like stolen moments. And it is only when that is threatened where Fred is like, holy shit, I need to snap back into it. What is going on? Like, oh my God, I need to like really pay attention. And as Fred is sitting in her room after this shopping experience, Jess, that you have just described, she's sitting there just like ruminating on what is going on. And later she's like, oh my God, what am I doing? I should have killed myself. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? But this is after she suspects that she is pregnant, and she has told this to Nick, who is a secret eye and who is a secret part of the men's like Mayday network. And so Nick calls a coup, more or less, and has Fred arrested, and Offred is taken away. And that is the end of the book, very abrupt as it is. And we have seen that scene on TV. And it, again, is hard to separate the two, but it is nice that it happens in both.
Yeah, I think I remember liking Nick even in the beginning.
Yeah, I like Nick too, who is a little jaunty hat. So, Jess, talk to me then about your experience with the epilogue, because the epilogue's not on TV. You didn't know it was coming. It's a historical note. So honestly, I wasn't sure if you were going to continue reading or if you're just going to be like, oh, like historical note, author's note, and just keep going.
Yeah, I think I had to go back, not like reread it a couple times, but I would go into the notes to be like, wait, is this accurate historical fiction? Like, these were the historical notes that we pulled from, until they started like saying, like referencing Gilead. And I go, oh, okay. So this is Gilead's historical notes. Interesting. And this is from like my research after. These historical notes were supposed to are taking place in 2195. So that I think is interesting, and how they just keep referencing things kind of leveled out. It's in the Gilead period, which alludes to say this is what was happening, but we've moved past it and are no longer in the Gilead era. So do you say it's a happy ending because you're no longer there, but it happened? I don't know. I feel like I was in and out of the historical notes of it all, but I was very much like, I could do another reread of that, honestly.
So all of the speakers are Native American, and they are the chairs of Caucasian studies. So yes, we love that. All about that. Come on. So it is interesting then to have this perspective. So what happens in the historical notes is that we're at a symposium, right? There's like a cosplay event. There's like a themed dinner. There's like all of these things to like interact with like real life. And it's all of these lectures that are being given. And we are listening into one of these like lectures. And in the lectures, they're talking about these cassette tapes that they found in an army locker in one of these like old houses, and they opened them up and they had to build a fucking machine to like listen to cassette tapes, and they did that, and then they transcribed them, and they found that it was just this lady talking, and it was all out of order, and it was all crazy, and they tried their very best to put it in some sort of logical order for people to read. And then they talk about how, yeah, it's like really unreliable because not only was nothing like labeled or numbered, we listened, transcribed it, and then put it in order. We're guessing.
Well, and then they doubted it too. Like, yes, she's an unreliable narrator, but because of the context, they were like, she refers to this person. We looked up, that name doesn't seem to exist. We looked up, if we could find anything, even about the commander, maybe there would be some truth to this story, which is also really interesting saying this out loud, because then it's like, oh my gosh, here she is, a victim. And once again, the victim is not being believed in her story. Oh my God.
Isn't that really crazy? Isn't that really something when you come like all the way around it? Like, believe women, right? But like, I don't know. Like, maybe.
I'm like, you saw me, like, you saw my face, like, oh my God, I'm talking through. You're denying the victim of the truth.
Yeah, isn't that
like women? Here, like, yes, she's an unreliable narrator, but also, this is her truth. This is the truth. Mm-hmm. This is her truth.
This is her truth. So then they go on and the person giving this lecture goes on and says like, oh, well, it could have been this person or could have been this person. And then it goes through like, like Fred Waterford. Of course, we know from the show that it was Fred Waterford. We know that, but they don't know that here. So they say like, he was a scientist and he was in like market research or whatever. So he was probably one of the big architects of Gilead. He was really high up. Like, this was probably him. And like his wife kind of fits the bill, but like Offred was being kind of a bitch about her for some reason. Like,
honestly, but I would be too. I think we would all be, if we were in Offred's position, everybody else trying to act like, the commander and the commanders and their wives, they want to try to act like the victims. You did this. You created this. Why are you playing the victim? At least the Marthas, you're kind of like, you were either going to be a Martha or you were going to go sent into the colony. And like poor Cora was just a Martha who's like, I just want to take care of a baby. I'll be an aunt. I'll be a grandma. I'll just like, because we all know it's not, the wives aren't going to raise these kids.
Yeah. The wives aren't going to raise these kids. Also, while we're here, I want to touch on Econo wives, because Econo wives is not something that I really remember from the show. I don't remember the striped dresses, but maybe I'm just like misremembering that. But Econo wives are a class of wife in this Gilead society, that they don't get handmaidens. They have to do everything. They don't get Marthas. They are just like a regular traditional housewife. They're just like every normal person. Like they have to do it all. They don't get any special like allowances. But again, speaking of the isolation, Jess, that you have mentioned, the Econo wives have discussed for the handmaidens, and the handmaidens are like, no, we see you. There's a specific funeral scene, and Offred's like, I see you, like camaraderie, and the Econo wives spit at them. It's just like, fuck you, like we don't want anything to do with you. So again, it's like a camaraderie of women, but only within your own group, but then only for yourself,
which is also very much I feel like women in our society, we're still trying to unbreak that. Like, yes, we've come a long way, but not so much. I mean, we're just learning to just say embrace it and lean into it and accept it, and still trying to protect ourselves, because there are still so many women out there, just like in The Handmaid's Tale, who are more likely to be subservient to men and make decisions that would appease the patriarchy than have that camaraderie with women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One more thing I just want to touch on. Just one more thing. Talking about religion, knowing about the lessons that we have, specifically in the book, in the source material, The Handmaid's Tale, the book. We're reading it, we're like, hot damn. Obviously, we have a very visceral reaction. We have a very emotional reaction. When the torture is described of the frayed metal cables on the feet, like my feet hurt, like in a sympathetic, like kind of pain. It's just like it's very real. So it is then so fucking strange to have Elizabeth Moss being a goddamn Scientologist. It is strange. It is just one of those strange things that you're like, really? Because this broad conversation of religion, we don't have any sort of, here's the thing. There is a conversation happening about a lack of critical thinking and media literacy. And it's like, it's staring us all in the face. At some point, you're just like, okay, I need to make the connections myself and to have these hard conversations with them myself about like how I feel about things, right?
Well, I mean, the same. I know we referenced the show earlier, but The Boys, you had 3 seasons of The Boys, and you're like, okay, anybody with some sort of media literacy comprehension knew what sort of messages were going along in seasons 1 through 3. Season 4 came out. I'm only in episode 3, but I was talking to a friend of show, Becky, and I was like, oh, they really were like, oh, we're going to spell this out for you now because nobody seems to be getting it.
Yeah.
Point blank. Like, I was like, oh, they're just, oh, this fucking play is about us. They had to, because it wasn't being grasped.
It wasn't being grasped, and you had to like hit yourself over the head with it. So again, there is that to be said. So I think I really enjoy this conversation. We have delved into a lot of topics here. I guess my question, Jess, red is your color. Like, you look fantastic in red.
Yeah, I could own that. Yeah, I do. I also look good in green, so I'd be a good one.
Because, and I'm just saying this because, Offred makes a lot of like little throwaway comments. And of course it's not throwaway because when you're reading the book, like everything is very important. It's like, she says, like, you're collecting your sanity for use later. Like, you're collecting all these little things so that you really have an image of June. But June says like red is just not her color. It's just like, she looks awful in red. And it does help to kind of, not humanize because she's very humanized, but it does kind of like inject a little bit of like, not even humor, but just like, what the hell? Like, you like couldn't even get a color I look good in. Like, come on. Is this like this really? And just kind of adding into this at the tail end, the character of Moira and this beacon of friendship that that Offred has throughout the book. They have a very lovely friendship, contentious at times, but also like very true and full of love. And it is very then sad when Offred says, like, I never saw Moira again after her second meeting in the bathroom at Jezebel's. She's like, and I would like to say that Moira ran out in a blaze and that she burned everything down and like she was a pillar of strength, but I never saw her.
She also never went back to Jezebel's.
She also never went back to Jezebel's, and we do not know in The Handmaid's Tale what happens to Offred. So again, being an unreliable narrator, we don't know. We don't know. But I think that I mean, again, I'll say it again. This ending took me by fucking surprise. Like, I just had no idea that this is where it was going to go. I was really anticipating, I'll tell you this, I was anticipating like a drawn out sort of like trial situation and like a reassignment, and then like the government, like the Canadian government or something would come in and like prove why we have the Geneva Convention, and then just like wipe everybody out. And when that didn't happen and we had this like academic part of it, I was just like, this is special. Like, this is very special.
Do you remember if you had this, because you read this first, do you remember having that same reaction the first time you read the epilogue? Or like, did you have the same reaction both times to the epilogue because you did it in the order of read, watch, read again?
So the first time I was just flabbergasted. I was like, oh my God, like, that's so fucking cool. I need to know like more about this. Like, is this where it's going to go? Like, God, that's cool. And then the show, I was like, okay. And then I have been watching the show, and this is the first time I reread it since I watched the show. And then rereading it now, it's just like, oh God, this is good. Like, this must be where it's going, but like, it's so fucking drawn out. Like, of course, again, I have not read the Testaments, and like, and I know what kind of happens there with Aunt Lydia, but that's all I really know. And it was important for me to like keep my context here. But I haven't read that. So like, my knowledge is limited here. And I think that is kind of a different conversation to have as well. Like, what do you do? And I guess it kind of feeds into the, like, I'm angry about my fan fiction kind of story too, because, 6 seasons of the show, there's the Testaments. Does it match up? I'm not really sure. Like, how does that fit into the story? It was written like, I don't know how that conversation goes. It will be the same conversation that people have whenever George R.R. Martin ever decides to finish The Winds of Winter. So we finally have some sort of conclusion on what's happening on Game of Thrones.
I have a lot of opinions about Gurm, and I haven't even read them, but I have a lot of opinions that I can go ahead. I have a question just to kind of like also like wrap everything up. Do you think you would survive Gilead? Like, and it doesn't have to be like a yes or no. Like, I feel like there's a lot of gray area we would have to work with.
Yeah, sure. Okay. This is a great question. So one of the themes of this book is that humans are very adaptable. Like, you're very adaptable. It is easy to become accustomed to circumstances, and then those circumstances become common, and then it's so common. It's always been like that. Don't you know? It's always been like that. Offred compares it to a lobster being slowly boiled alive in a pot. It's like, and she was even talking about like sibling dynamics. We were like, we have some people who will remember this in like 3 or 4 years when they were like 3 or 5 years old, but the next generation after kindergarten, they're not going to have any recollection. I mean, it's kind of like with the generations who don't remember there was a time without socials and internet and everything. Exactly. So like, it's this very interesting question. So like, every circumstance can become common. So I think it would depend very much on the circumstances, because the circumstances of Gilead there's been a nuclear fucking war, and the United States is fucking decimated, and everyone is sterile because of all the toxins everywhere, and the food is bland and is what it is because of fucking supply chains, and the colonies exist for all of the unwomen to go clean up the world because it is not sustainable. And that's the other kind of theme here is sustainability. Like,
and let's not forget the unwomen are considered unwomen because they cannot procreate.
Right.
You are given that title because you are no use to society because you cannot bear children.
Right. And then, and as in Offred's time in The Handmaid's Tale, again, it has only been 3 years. And through the brainwashing and through the conditioning, this has become so commonplace that it has everyone questioning, like, I remember like when I could shave my arms and like shave my legs and I could do all of that. I can't do that now. There's no glass anywhere. Like we are longing for, it's like the suicidal ideation everywhere. Like all of these adaptable things to circumstances. So me personally, I think it would depend on the circumstances of which they fucking caught me because, I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Part of me says it would be way better to be at Jezebel's. Way better. There's more opportunity, all sorts of opportunity there. And another part of me says it would be easier to die in the colonies. And then another part of me says I would never could be a handmaiden. It's too much tension. Yeah. Right. That's the other thing too, is like all of these interactions with like the commander and with Serena and with Offred and in the house, it's all tense.
Even if he wasn't sterile, the commander wasn't sterile. You know how often they tell people, especially if you're actively trying to get pregnant, to not be stressed, to not put pressure on your body. Hell, even if you're not trying to have kids, but just in regards to like having your period, any type of stress can throw it off. So to what you said, like maybe she's not getting pregnant because of all that tension in the house.
Yeah. So I just don't think that I could live in a situation with that much boredom and tension. I think
she can't even read.
She can't do anything. She's alone in her room all of the time. Like, so, and her only escape is Nick. And that's why she like kind of gives up, because she's like, and she talks about like, all I want is like touch. I want to touch something that isn't wood. Like I want to.
And what does she say? She's like, I used to think I can't live without sex. And she goes, I can live without sex. I can't live without love.
Yeah. And it's all of this. And then there is this conversation too, no lovey-dovey, you won't have you mooning and juning around. It's just this whole thing. So, I don't know. I don't know. I think I would end up dying either way. Any situation that I found myself in, I would die. I do not think I would last long as a handmaiden. I would reach up and try to strangle him. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Your temper would get.
I couldn't.
You would just like, when people like black out, you would just that would be.
Yeah. That's what would happen. Actually, that's exactly what would happen. So
because you can't even say like, okay, if this is the direction that we were going in, these are the steps that I would take to prepare myself, like actively sterilize myself with like OBs that do those procedures. But you can't say that because they tried to prepare. Luke and Offred tried to prepare to just say like, we're not taking anything with us. We have our day visas to go to Canada, and they were still caught. Mm-hmm. So you can't even, preparing is like, you can't, that you're not in that society.
Yep. So yeah, that's my answer. You? Death?
Well, I know I wouldn't be. Yeah, I think I always just say like, I'm going to kill myself. Cause we were talking about space the other day and I was like, kill me. I just don't want to go. I think if I were going to survive, I think it would be a Martha. I know I wouldn't be a handmaid and I haven't had a kid. So I know I couldn't be one like that. I'm like, okay, common sense. I feel like I don't even know if I have it in me to like the energy to run. That's what I think. I think I'd just be a Martha. I'll cook for you. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's like the millennial in me. Where I'm like, I'll fight if I can, but like if I can't, all right, I'm exhausted. Kill me or like do something about it. Like I don't have the time.
That's actually pretty fair. And then just like zone out doing housework. Like why not? Yeah. Because I wouldn't be a wife. Yeah. Yeah. None of us would marry those assholes.
No. Like, even if survival instincts, I would kill myself before I get to the colonies, though.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt. Wow. What an uplifting thing. I think that there is, though, a message of hope in this, just as you mentioned when we were talking about the epilogue as we're wrapping here, because it does end in the future. Yeah. Which does mean that we're past this. Yeah. And the lecturer does say that, like, yeah, this is very important because this period redrew the map. Like, it redrew the map, and we have to, like, deal with that. But we are past this. And that is very important. That's very hopeful. And even though Offred's account is being questioned and, like, she's an unreliable narrator, we know this, but everyone's like, I don't know, don't really know, you know. It is important to point out that her story is being told, and it is being heard, and it is being discussed, and it is she is alive through all of that. So nothing that she did or experienced or was done to her was ever in vain, because it's all part of, like, this greater thing that we are able to look at and educate ourselves on, so that, again, it doesn't happen again in the future.
Yeah, it's a huge learning for everybody because they are referencing her experience.
Yes. So again, like, everything is important, and it's all out there for everybody, again, because it could, again, just to kind of, like, put the pin in this could have been a, like, we don't talk about this, like, this dark period that we don't talk about this, but, like, here's this one thing. But no, this is a huge thing that everyone is aware of, and tons of people are participating in, and there's active research in. So I think that's an important part.
Yeah, and we need to make this known. It's not like when, history was written by the victors, this feels like the victors lost, but like, I say the victors, they were the victors of their time. This could have been, during their time, something that was swept away, and it wasn't.
Yeah. And I think that is very important, because you always need to learn and know your history so that you do not repeat it.
We're still working on that here. But that being said, feel free to follow us on Instagram. We're at ACOFAE Podcast. We're also both on TikTok, ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica. And we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Bye.